Hello and welcome to Everywoman. On today's show, a grandmother tells us of her brutal ordeal at the hands of Zimbabwean police. A world of difference. A young girl explains how it is to grow up a Muslim in New Zealand. And naughty but nice, Begum Nawazish, Pakistan's controversial chat show diva, joins me on the sofa. But first, it's caused a wave of controversy throughout the Muslim world and sparked a debate that goes right to the heart of Islam. It's a new interpretation of the Quran published this week, and in it the author challenges the meaning of words that feminists say have been used to justify the abuse of women. Dr. Laleh Bakhtier, an Iranian-American, has had to defend her work against critics who've questioned her interpretation. Dr. Laleh is an Islamic scholar and joins us now from Chicago. And in the studio is Dr. Umaima Abu Bakr, a professor from the University of Qatar, who disagrees with Dr. Laleh's translation. Ladies, welcome to you both. Thank you for joining us. Laleh, let me come to you first. This is a highly controversial work. Why did you want to do this?
Well, because English is my mother tongue, so I looked at all of the translations, and none of them were what I call inclusive, and that's why I felt Islam was so misunderstood in the West. So I wanted to use terminology in the translation that would help people understand better what Islam stands for.
Now, the big bone of contention is the translation of verse 34 in chapter 4, which is traditionally taken to mean that rebellious women should be beaten by men. But you say that that word has a different translation. Why have you come to that conclusion?
Yes, well, Islam promotes marriage, encourages marriage as an act, a moral act, and discourages divorce as an immoral act. So I thought that Idrab in 434 was being misunderstood, and I realized the contradiction that we ourselves had created when I read chapter 2, Surah Baqarah 2:31, and it said that if women want a divorce, they cannot be harmed. So the logical conclusion of that is, if Muslim women want to divorce, they cannot be harmed, but if they want to stay married, it's under the threat of being beaten. So this is clearly a contradiction that is not in the Arabic of the Quran. I want to say that I do believe in the Arabic of the Quran, that it is the eternal word of God, and I live my life by it. But the contradictions come in our interpretations of it. So this was why basically I realized that what the Prophet did was he went away. And the word daraba and izrab in its imperative form also means to go away. So I say we should revert the interpretation back to the way the Prophet understood it.
You obviously have a very technical knowledge of the Quran, which far outstrips mine. Let me come to Umaima. Laleh's translation does make the Quran much more woman-friendly. What do you think about it?
Yes. Of course, the idea of the Quran, that the legacy of the tafsir or the interpretations being mostly interpreted by men or male interpretation, this is an idea, or this is a cause that has been studied. This is not, of course, unique or peculiar to Islam, by the way. It's not an accusation or a condemnation to Islam by any means when we say this. This is something that, as I was saying, that has been studied and proven by historians and
But do you think the new translation is right? Could it be right?
The problem is, as much as I would like to believe that it really doesn't mean strike or beat, who wouldn't, being a woman, being a Muslim practicing woman, who wouldn't? As much as I would like to believe that indeed it doesn't mean strike or beat, I have to be honest. We have to have respect for the text, because there are other issues involved. The syntactic, the sentence structure maybe merits that it really means strike or beat. Yeah.
Okay, yes, Laleh, what do you want to say to that?
I say I agree with her. When you do a grammatical analysis, there is a question, but my point is that our beloved Prophet, peace and the mercy of God be upon him, he was unlettered. And when the Quran was revealed to him, I don't think he thought, well, is this a transitive verb or an intransitive verb? Is it going to be a direct object or an indirect object? He went away. And I think we have to do the same thing. We have to understand it the way the Prophet understood it, and not go into all this hair splitting over the grammar and at least in the interpretation of it. The Quran is correct in what it says in Arabic, but I'm talking about, you know, the interpretation, which Dr. Aima is also referring to.
I agree with you on the premise. What worries me is that we could get, as women, as Muslim women, we could get carried away with our wish to make the interpretation women-friendly.
It's an interesting debate, though, isn't it?
Because make it sound, make it mean what we want it to mean.
You're going against centuries of received wisdom and interpretation that have stood the test of time from venerable scholars and imams who say that you are wrong.
Yes, that's right, because none of them were at the other end of the mesvak that they were being beaten with. They were doing the beating, and so now we have to look at it from the victim position, and the shelters for battered women here are filled with Muslim women whose husbands were supposed to just use a handkerchief or a toothpick, and unfortunately they forgot that. So we have to change this, because Islam is not going to be better understood as long as we commit immoral acts ourselves against our marriage partners.
Ladies, it's been a fascinating debate, and one that I know will continue outside of this studio. Dr. Laleh Bakhtier and Dr. Umaima Abu Bakr, thank you very much for joining us on Everywoman.
Thank you.
To Zimbabwe now, where, as we've reported in the past, people campaigning for changes are regularly beaten and locked away by police. Sekai Holland is a 64-year-old grandmother. She's also a member of the Movement for Democratic Change, opposing the government of Robert Mugabe. Recently, she suffered a brutal attack at the hands of the police that resulted in over 80 injuries. She was so badly hurt, she had to be evacuated to Johannesburg for medical treatment. From hospital, she told our reporter Callie Maestri what happened to her in Harare.
I was met by 5 men who each, instead of telling me why they were calling me, started assaulting me from the front. And I asked them why they were doing this, because my name was being called inside. I had to go into a passage onto the left. Another 5 men met me, and they were hitting me from the front, while the ones who were hitting me as I came were hitting me at the back. That's when we discovered I had a broken leg, broken arm. So in South Africa, they've been able to give me 3 sets, I think, of surgeries and a skin graft.
Sekai, were you surprised at all at the level of brutality that was meted out to the women that were amongst the arrested group?
No, because violence is part of Zimbabwean society. All these things show a very corrupt regime which acts outside the law.
How much of a role do the women in Zimbabwe play in the struggle? Because it's always seen as a male-dominated arena.
The women have always been there. In our society, in Zimbabwe, when things really become difficult, men always ask, now what are the women thinking? And always when they incorporate women's energies, things really come to an end quicker. We have a women's assembly in the MDC and a youth assembly in the MDC, which are very strong.
Now, Sekai, you're a political activist, but do you also see yourself as a women's rights activist?
I'm a women's rights activist first. Even that comes before the political activism, because until the place of women in society is acknowledged, as it indeed is, societies move forward with women's effort, more than 50%. But it's not acknowledged in the public and in the formal spheres. So our fight has always been to get proper legislation, proper representation.
Sekai, your political involvement in Zimbabwe comes at great personal cost to you. Why do you do it?
We change the culture of corruption, the culture of violence, the lack of rule of law, so that in a new constitution, in the Bill of Rights, our new society is protected, and that we have institutions of democracy that ensure that never again will there be a Mugabe or a Smith or a culture of impunity, that those cultures are behind us.
Very brave woman there. Well, coming up in the second half, Pakistan's queen of the chat shows joins me here on the sofa. Not sure I'm going to survive the experience. Join us after the break.